Hello and welcome to the Postmodern Prometheus, a new podcast dedicated to all things Frankenstein. My name is Asha Harrington and
I'm Nancy. This year is the 200th anniversary of the publication of Frankenstein, and we have been fans of the novel and various other adaptations of Frankenstein for a very long time. So we thought it would be a good time to start this podcast so we can openly air our obsessions with this text.
And grievances.
And various grievances. And we hope you'll join us in this journey through the fun world of Frankenstein media.
Both the original text and everything that's come after.
Yes.
And there's a lot.
There is a lot. So we'll probably start with the more well-known adaptations and work our way through to the more obscure Frankenstein texts, or the ones that could be very loosely tied with Frankenstein.
As we run out of material, we will just be delving into the general science fiction, because pretty much every science fiction story is at least owes something to Frankenstein.
That's right.
At least every robot story.
And we'll definitely get into the life of Mary Shelley and the way that it's been represented in media as well. But I think this is our first episode, so we want to discuss a little bit about how we got into Frankenstein, and our first discussion will be about the text. We'll be working off the 1818 original novel, and then we'll talk about the various contrasts between that version and the later 1831 edition.
I found out the other day that there is also an 1816 manuscript edition.
Oh.
But I feel like it's probably impossible to find. And apparently that's the one that has the least amount of any kind of tampering or notes from Percy Shelley.
Is that so?
So it's but God knows where you find that, because I think the only reason you can find the 1818 one in bookstores is because it's the bicentennial.
Well, I think in recent days or recent years, more and more scholars have turned to the 1818 edition as the more definitive text compared to the 1831 edition. So it's quite interesting how that perception changes over time. It would be really interesting to see the 1816 a version. But
manuscript.
Yeah, but I don't know. Maybe it will be published as a scholarly text somewhere one day. But, maybe with our listeners' support, we can find wherever it's located and try to convince them to let us see it.
Well, I mean, the book is in the public domain.
Yes.
So, come on.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But
anyway, back to how we got into
how
the
did you
novel.
get into it?
Well, 6 or 7, maybe 8 years ago, me and Nancy took a literature class at our high school, and the primary reason I think I did the class is that when we went to the VCE sort of subject night, which is where you just go around and look at all the different subjects and choose what you want to do, is that they had Frankenstein displayed on the table as one of the studied texts. And I was just like, ooh, cool. Let's do that.
Yeah. Well, I have to say that I studied the text in the class with you, but I actually listened to it on audiobook the previous summer.
In preparation, or just because you're a nerd?
I don't think I was listening to it for study, but pretty much that summer I had this terrible job of delivering pamphlets. So, so I was walking around my
What do you
suburb,
mean? That sounds like the perfect job for you.
like delivering adverts and pamphlets and stuff. And I just was listening to the audiobook version because I tried to read it and it was really hard. Or maybe I was reading it after listening to it and I found it really hard.
It is kind of a hard book to read just because, you know, it's written 200 years ago and just the writing styles change and the way punctuation is used changes. So she has a lot of, you know, run-on sentences. And I study editing, and she also, like, I think the use of the semicolon has just developed in leaps and bounds because when I just started rereading it, I think on the first page, I was like, there are so many semicolons in this first paragraph, and none of them are used right.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously language usage changes. So it's probably like one of the, outside of, say, like Jane Austen books or Bronte sisters books, one of the sort of earliest kind of books I read that was written during that period. And it was like really different to sort of all the other contemporary fiction that I was reading at the time. So it was probably a little bit jarring. So I was glad that I first listened to it read aloud because I think it helped it to make a lot more sense. But yeah,
Was that your very first sort of introduction to the story, or had you seen films of it beforehand?
No, I think actually I'd never seen any sort of adaptation of Frankenstein before then. And I'm glad for that because it's quite different the way that the novel is and the way it's presented in media. What about you?
I think the first version of it I saw was the Kenneth Branagh adaptation, film adaptation.
And you saw that before reading the novel?
Yeah, I saw that before reading it.
Okay.
Which kind of made me dislike the book when I first read it because as it's made by Kenneth Branagh, so everything has to be like, the emotion has to be charged like times a million, and it's already a very emotional text. And so have you watched it all the way through? Because it has like a very dramatic ending. Like it changes certain things.
Well, you forced me to watch it, so
I did, didn't I? I stand by the film. I think it's great, but it does take liberties, particularly with the ending. It does something very climactic, which is not in the book. So when I was first reading the book, I was disappointed that wasn't there. But as I studied the book, I sort of realized that the tweaked ending didn't actually make sense if you're actually following the book's canon. But I still stand by the film. But yeah, we'll get more into like why my issue with the Kenneth Branagh one as we go on, because the issue I have with the Kenneth Branagh one is my issue with most adaptations, in that they do a thing where the creature starts to remember his old life before he was reanimated, which I dislike for a number of reasons, and you'll just have to stay tuned to find out why.
yes, I think we'll have to have a seriously long episode dedicated to the Kenneth Branagh adaptation and the various other adaptations. I think we also, when we first studied the text as part of high school, we also watched the original James Whale film.
Yeah.
And that has been sort of obviously really influential on kind of all subsequent adaptations. And I think just having read the novel first, it made me really cautious about all subsequent adaptations of Frankenstein. it already like predisposed me to be like, oh no, all these adaptations are going to be really awful and not representative of the text. But yeah.
Because, yeah, I think the Frankenstein of that film, that classic Hollywood Frankenstein, and the Frankenstein, like the novel, are very different. They're just very different beasts. They're like inspired. It's inspired by, but they're very different things. And I think, but like in ways, it definitely does draw from. Like I think the creature in those classic Hollywood films is still meant to be sort of sympathetic and kind of and innocent in a way that is then sort of corrupted by the world or is misunderstood. And like there's definitely connections, but they're doing very different things and are just very different creations.
Haha, creations. Well, if you have any thoughts on Frankenstein, come find us somewhere on the internet where we will sure be. Because we ain't got no social media or email address yet.
Yikes. If this goes well, we'll set up a Facebook page.
Maybe.
Maybe even a Twitter. We're not starting a Twitter. Oh, maybe.
No.
If you
no
want
Twitter.
Tweet us your questions. And if you'd like to donate to our Patreon that we do not have yet, money might go towards us funding our own Frankenstein musical.
Oh.
But Asha, I hear you say, the Frankenstein musical is already a thing. Yeah, I know, but it's shit and ours is better.
Is it? Is it?
It's not, but at least it's like funny. But Asha, isn't young Frankenstein? Shut up! You want like a campy but like good but not without its issues but just enjoyable rock musical about like a mad scientist. Watch Jekyll and Hyde.
Jesus.